Ethan Gallagher had only been driving for Uber for 4 months when the ride request came through at 1:07 a.m. on a Saturday night in late September. But in those 4 months, he'd already developed the Boston driver's skepticism about late-night pickups. The college kids who threw up in his back seat. The Southie bar hoppers who wanted to fight everyone, including him. The Back Bay Trust Fund babies who rated him 1 star because he wouldn't let them smoke in his car. He almost declined the request when he saw the pickup location, a residential address in Jamaica Plain rather than a bar or club. That usually meant either a medical emergency or someone who'd been drinking at home and was now too impaired to form complete sentences. But the surge pricing was 2.3x, and Ethan needed to make his car payment by the 15th, so he accepted the ride. He followed the GPS through the quiet streets to a large Victorian house. Lights blazed in every window. Music thumped through the walls. A house party that was clearly winding down based on the handful of people smoking on the front porch and the general air of exhaustion that hung over the property like a fog. A girl emerged from the front door almost immediately, 17 or 18 years old, Ethan guessed, wearing a dress that was too thin for the September night. Her makeup was smeared. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She climbed into his back seat without a word. She pulled the door shut with a slam that made him wince. "You okay?" Ethan asked. He watched her in the rearview mirror as she huddled against the door, arms wrapped around herself, shaking in a way that might have been cold or might have been something else entirely. She nodded without looking at him. "Just drive, please. 847 Maple Street, Brookline. Just get me out of here." Ethan didn't ask questions. It wasn't his place, wasn't his business, and the desperation in her voice suggested that whatever had happened at that party was something she wanted to leave behind as quickly as possible. So he pulled away from the curb. He headed toward Brookline. He watched the house party shrink in his mirrors. The girl's reflection shook and cried silently in his back seat. Her phone was clutched in her hands like a lifeline. The screen glowed faintly against her tear-stained face. The ride should have taken 20 minutes through the empty late-night streets. For the first 10 minutes, nothing unusual happened, just the quiet hum of the engine, the girl's occasional sniffles, the glow of streetlights passing over the car in rhythmic waves. Then, at the halfway point, as they crossed into Brookline and the neighborhoods grew quieter and more residential, the girl's phone buzzed with an incoming message. She looked at the screen, and she screamed.
The scream was unlike anything Ethan had ever heard. Not the startled yelp of someone surprised, not the dramatic shriek of a teenager at a horror movie. This was the sound of pure, primal terror. The sound of someone who had just seen something so horrifying that their mind couldn't process it, could only react with the most basic, most ancient response to mortal threat. Ethan slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop in the middle of the empty street. He spun in his seat. The girl was pressed against the door. Her phone was held out in front of her like a weapon or a shield. Her eyes were wide and white. Her mouth was still open in that terrible, endless scream. "What's wrong? What happened?" Ethan shouted. He reached toward her. She thrust the phone into his hands, still screaming, tears streaming down her face. Ethan looked at the screen. His blood turned to ice. The message that had just arrived was a photo of the girl, taken from inside the car, from an angle that would have been directly beside her in the back seat, close enough to touch, close enough to count the individual tears on her cheek. His first thought was that someone had hacked her phone, accessed her camera remotely, taken the photo using some kind of malware. But the angle was wrong for that. It wasn't looking up from the phone. It wasn't looking out from a forward-facing camera. It was looking at her from the side, from the position where another passenger would sit, where no one was sitting, where no one could possibly be sitting, because Ethan had checked the back seat before picking her up, had watched her get in, had verified that she was alone. He looked at the empty seat beside her, at the shadow that pooled in the corner where the streetlights didn't reach. For just a moment, just a fraction of a second that he would later try to convince himself he'd imagined, he thought he saw something there, a darker shape within the darkness, something that might have been a figure hunched in the corner of his car, something that might have been watching, waiting, smiling in the dark. Who sent this? Ethan demanded. His voice was high and thin with a fear he couldn't control. "I don't know," the girl sobbed. "I don't know. I don't know. The number isn't in my phone. It's no one I know. Oh God, someone's in the car with us. Someone's been watching me. Someone—" Ethan threw open his door. He stumbled out onto the street. He ran around to the passenger side. He yanked open the back door, ready to fight, ready to drag whoever was hiding in his back seat out into the light. But the back seat was empty, had always been empty, was nothing but worn leather and a faint smell of cleaning solution, and the girl's terrified face staring at him from the far side. Her phone still glowed in her hand. The photo was still visible on the screen, proof that something impossible had happened. Ethan drove the girl home without speaking. Both of them were too shaken to form words. When she got out at 847 Maple Street, she didn't thank him, didn't rate him, didn't look back. She just ran up the walkway and disappeared inside a house where lights were already turning on in the windows. A woman's concerned voice was calling her name. She would probably spend the next several hours trying to explain what had happened without sounding insane. Ethan sat in his car for a long time. He stared at the empty back seat in his rearview mirror. Then he did what any driver with half a brain would do. He checked his dashcam footage. He rewound to the moment the photo had been sent. He looked for some explanation, some glitch, some evidence that would make the impossible make sense. The footage showed exactly what he remembered. The girl sitting alone in the back seat, crying, looking at her phone, screaming. Nothing else. No mysterious figure. No shadow that moved wrong. No explanation for the photo that had appeared on her phone from an angle that implied someone was sitting right beside her. But as Ethan studied the footage frame by frame, something caught his eye. Something about the angle of the photo on the girl's phone, the way the streetlight hit the interior of the car in the image, the precise position of the viewpoint. It was familiar. It was exactly right. It was the angle he would see if he were sitting in the position where a child's car seat had once been installed. Ethan had bought his car used 6 months ago, a certified pre-owned Honda Civic from a dealership in Quincy. He'd noticed the anchor points in the back seat where a car seat had clearly been attached at some point, the faint impressions in the leather where small feet had kicked over many rides, the scratches on the back of the passenger seat where toys had been dropped or thrown. He'd never thought to ask about the previous owner, never thought to wonder why a family car had been traded in with only 30,000 miles on it, never thought to imagine what might have happened to the child who had once ridden in that back seat,
But now, at 2 a.m. on a Saturday night, with a photo on a stranger's phone that had been taken from inside his car by someone who wasn't there, Ethan thought about it. He thought about it so intensely that his hands shook and his vision blurred, and he had to pull over to the side of the road because he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only search on his phone for news articles about car accidents involving that specific make and model, that specific year, that specific dealership. He found the story in the Quincy Patriot Ledger archives, dated 14 months before he'd bought the car. A 3-car accident on Route 3, a family of 4, a drunk driver who crossed the median at 70 miles per hour. The parents survived with injuries. The infant in the front-facing car seat was unharmed, but the 7-year-old girl in the rear passenger seat, the position where the photo had been taken, had been killed on impact. Her name was Rebecca. Her photo showed a smiling child with dark hair and bright eyes and a gap-toothed grin. The image reminded Ethan with a lurch of horror the vague shadow shape he'd thought he'd seen in his back seat, the darker shape within the darkness, the something that had been watching. The car had been repaired, cleaned, certified, resold, and apparently Rebecca had never left, had never moved on, was still sitting in the seat where she'd died, still watching the passengers who came and went, still reaching out in the only way she could, still trying to make someone see her, acknowledge her, know that she was there. Ethan sold the car the next week. He took a loss he couldn't afford because he couldn't stand to sit in the driver's seat anymore, couldn't stand to feel that presence behind him, couldn't stand to wonder if the next photo would appear on his own phone, taken from the back seat, showing him from an angle that only a ghost could achieve. The new owner was a college student from Northeastern who needed cheap transportation. He messaged Ethan 3 weeks later with a question that made Ethan's blood run cold. "Hey, weird question, but did you ever notice anything strange about the back seat? My girlfriend swears she saw a little girl sitting back there when we were driving last night, but when we turned around, there was no one there." Ethan didn't respond. He deleted the message. He blocked the number. He told himself it wasn't his problem anymore. But sometimes, late at night, when he's riding in someone else's car and the shadows gather in the corners, he still checks his phone. He still waits for the message that might come. He still imagines a smiling child with dark hair and bright eyes taking his picture from a seat that should be empty, from the space between life and death where some passengers never stop riding.